Welcome back to Hardware Unboxed. Today we're checking out a hotly requested ultra-wide monitor, the Gigabyte G34WQC. This particular display has been gathering a ton of attention, mostly due to its very attractive price point that makes it one of the cheapest 3440 by 1440 144Hz ultra-wide monitors on the market. You know we love our value picks around here, so there's no way we weren't going to review the G34WQC at some point. What are Gigabyte offering here? Well, it's a fairly standard package for ultra-wides on the cheaper end of the scale. We're looking at a 34-inch 3440 by 1440 VA panel, likely a Samsung VA panel, with similar specifications to monitors we've reviewed in the past, like the Xiaomi Mi Curve 34 and AOC CU34G2X. It runs at up to 144Hz and of course includes all the usual adaptive sync bells and whistles. Previously, 21.9 monitors in this price range featured up to 100Hz refresh rates, but in 2020 it's been great to see a spec bump for most of these displays, and in my opinion a jump from 100Hz to 144Hz is quite noticeable. It is a curved display with a 1500R curve, again fairly standard for a modern ultra-wide monitor, and given the wide panel size I think a curve in this range is suitable, especially while gaming. There's also some wide gamut functionality, with Gigabyte quoting 90% DCI-P3 coverage, and while the display is Display HDR 400 certified, a lack of local dimming means that the G34WQC in practice does not have any meaningful HDR functionality. The biggest feature about this display is the price tag of just $400 US, which puts it around the mark of the cheapest 3440 by 1440 144Hz displays on the market. In some markets like Australia, where the G34WQC is $730, it's edged out by the Xiaomi Mi Curve 34 in terms of price. However, it does seem this Gigabyte alternative is more available in key regions, and it's actually in stock right now, which is quite rare for a monitor in 2020. Design-wise, what we're faced with here is very similar to Gigabyte's previous non-Aorus branded displays. So we're getting this large, wide, flat stand base that occupies quite a significant amount of desk space. It uses mostly basic black plastic with a few glossy highlights, and that's true for the rest of the monitor as well. The rear is fairly simple, no RGB lighting or other craziness, it just gets the job done with classic mid-range materials. The stand is height and tilt adjustable. It doesn't have the best range of motion I've seen from an ultra-wide, but the positive here is that overall it's quite sturdy. In fact, the build quality here is overall very solid. No issues with gaps in the design, which is occasionally a problem with curved ultra-wides. I would have preferred a smaller stand base just to save a bit of desk space, but it is what it is. For ports, we have two HDMI 2.0 and two DisplayPort 1.4, so that's a great selection. However, the HDMI ports are limited to 100Hz at native resolution, so as usual, PC gamers are better off using DisplayPort. There's some fairly average built-in speakers here for emergencies, but no USB hub. The on-screen display is controlled through a directional toggle on the rear of the monitor. Gigabyte's range of features here is pretty good, with crosshairs, timers, low blue light modes, shadow boosting modes, picture-in-picture, and a range of color controls. We aren't getting some of the active noise cancellation features seen on Gigabyte's higher-end Aorus products, but that's totally fine for a more budget-oriented product. Let's get into the response time numbers now, and like other Gigabyte monitors, we have just 3 overdrive modes. The first one is called picture quality, and it seems to be overdrive disabled. This is typical VA performance. A 9 millisecond average response time won't be exciting anyone, so let's move on. The balance mode is respectable, although perhaps not quite fast enough for a true 144Hz experience. We're seeing a 7.45 millisecond average response time with only a limited amount of overshoot for bright transitions, so you're unlikely to see inverse ghosting. However, dark level performance is poor, which is expected of a mid-range VA panel. An average dark transition of 13 milliseconds is slow and presents itself as dark level smearing, which you might have heard about when it comes to VA panels. Bump that up to the speed mode, and this is an evolution on the previous mode. We do get a faster 5.11 millisecond grey to grey transition, however there is more overshoot in the bright transition range. Generally speaking, with only 12% of transitions exhibiting inverse ghosting, I don't expect you'll spot bright trails too often, and this mode is pretty good for 144Hz gaming with a decent bump to clarity over the balance mode. Unfortunately, dark level performance is only improved marginally, so in all 3 modes you can expect dark level smearing. While the speed mode is fine for gaming at a locked 144Hz refresh rate, for variable refresh gaming it's not as suitable. At refresh rates below 144Hz, including 120Hz and 100Hz, overshoot becomes substantial and very noticeable. For this reason, I wouldn't recommend using the speed mode in conjunction with adaptive sync. Variable refresh gamers will want to use the balance mode. At 144Hz, this isn't as fast as the speed mode, and there isn't much of a difference in clarity between 120Hz and 144Hz as a result. However, it performs much better at lower refresh rates. Even down at 60Hz, you'll see a minor amount of overshoot while maintaining a 7 millisecond response time average, which is fine for this class of monitor. So realistically, the G34WQC does not have a single overdrive mode that's suitable for gaming across the entire refresh rate. At 144Hz, you'll probably want to use the speed mode, but for most variable refresh rate gaming or playing at lower refreshes, then the balance mode is ideal. While I think single overdrive mode gaming is a requirement for high-end monitors, this tends to be a compromise that's made with more mid-range to entry-level products, as panel performance isn't quite there. But really, the balance mode with this display delivers a pretty good experience in line with most VAs. Looking now at some comparison charts, and we'll start with peak performance at the highest refresh rate. The G34WQC punches above its weight here with a 5 millisecond response time experience fitting into the middle of the charts, around more expensive ultrawide and 16:9 monitors. Competitors like the Xiaomi Mi Curve 34 are not able to deliver this performance, although in their optimal modes you do see lower overshoot. However, when looking at the average error rate chart, it's clear that Gigabyte are pushing this panel right to its limits to hit this level of performance. Xiaomi, AOC and Nixius have all implemented more modest overdrive settings in their competing displays. Next up, we have average performance. So this is the best overdrive mode for variable refresh rate gaming with an average of results across the refresh range. Here the Gigabyte model is much closer to its competitors, with more like that 7 millisecond experience we've been talking about. But the good news here is the G34WQC is slightly faster than its budget competitors, like the AOC CU34G2X and the Mi Curve 34, about 10% faster, which points to slightly better overdrive tuning. The Nixius NX EDG34S is slightly better again, but it's also a more expensive product. Unfortunately, the one thing that can't be resolved is dark level smearing. The G34WQC does have some level of dark smearing, marginally better than some of its competitors, but clearly well behind high-end IPS ultrawides, which do not suffer from this problem at all. When buying into this ultrawide VA market, this is just something you'll have to put up with. At 60Hz, the G34WQC performs pretty well, outperforming most of its competitors due to solid performance in the balance mode. If you plan on playing mostly in this FPS range with adaptive sync enabled, this Gigabyte monitor is going to be 20 to 30% better than something like the Xiaomi Mi Curve 34. Input lag is decent, although limited somewhat by the refresh rate and response time performance. The processing delay on the part of the monitor is excellent though, at below 1 milliseconds, which is what we like to see from gaming displays. Power consumption, as expected, is mid-table, right around the mark of the Mi Curved, as we're looking at what I believe is the same panel. The AOC model fares a lot worse due to using a lower quality backlight. Gigabyte do provide a backlight strobing mode here called Aim Stabilizer, but it's unusable at both the 144Hz and 100Hz modes I tested due to severe strobe crosstalk. The image here is a lot worse than just the regular non-strobe image, so yeah, wouldn't be using it. In terms of color performance, the G34WQC is your typical wide gamut VA monitor in that there is a wider color gamut than sRGB only monitors, but we're not getting as wide of an experience as the best IPS displays we have right now. In my testing, I found around 88% DCI-P3 coverage, which is right on the mark for a typical Samsung VA panel, so about 20% more color volume than sRGB. Unfortunately, the G34WQC is not well factory calibrated. Grayscale performance is poor, with a few issues here. The color temperature is too high at 7600K on average instead of 6500K, which gives the display a noticeable blue or cold tint. Gamma performance isn't terrible, but it's slightly off sRGB accurate, and these two issues combine to produce very high delta E's. A delta E 2000 of 5.55 in grayscale is well below average for a gaming monitor. The average across all monitors I've tested is about 3.2 for grayscale, so this performance is not great. Getting grayscale wrong tends to propagate through the rest of our tests. The G34WQC isn't hugely oversaturated, but it is oversaturated to some degree, particularly in the higher color ranges. Again, delta E performance is somewhat below average here, and that's also true for color checker. The positive here is skin tones aren't too bad, so it's unlikely you'll see sunburnt faces when viewing sRGB content, but overall this is not a very accurate monitor out of the box. Here are my recommended settings for improving out-of-the-box performance. This was a tricky display to get right due to how far from accurate it is, but these tweaks should improve performance, although be mindful there is always some variance between units, so your mileage will vary. With these settings in place, I was able to correct the color temperature to produce a 6400K average, which is very good. I wasn't able to completely fix the gamma curve, but overall Delta E performance does improve substantially. Can't fix the oversaturation issue either really, there is an sRGB mode, but it's even worse than default performance. However, Delta E performance is about average for what can be done with OSD settings. The rest of the issues can be solved with a full color calibration through display cal, delivering typically great results for sRGB content. This is the only suitable way to correct oversaturation, although again, this monitor isn't too bad in that area. For P3 work, I wouldn't recommend this monitor as it doesn't really cover the entire P3 color space, which does cause some performance issues in the upper color range. Brightness is decent, around that standard 350 nit mark, which is a bit lower than my Xiaomi unit, but better than the AOC CU34G2X by a mile. Minimum brightness is also decent at around 50 nits, which is great for those that like to game in the dark. Speaking of gaming in the dark, one of the benefits to buying a VA panel is its black levels and contrast ratio. The G34WQC succeeds in this area with a 3100:1 contrast ratio, right around what we expected. This is great performance from a VA and well above IPS alternatives, which occupy most of the high end of the market right now. Viewing angles are pretty acceptable, although not fantastic. Similar thing with uniformity, which is pretty good all things considered. VA panels, ultrawide panels, and curved panels are all things that usually conspire against uniformity, but this Gigabyte monitor is respectable in this area with a slight luminance difference between the left and right sides that only an eagle eye would notice. At the end of the day, if you had asked me to guess how the G34WQC would perform without even testing it, I think that I'd have gotten pretty close to the performance I've just been talking about throughout this review. That is to say, there aren't many surprises here. This is a mid-range to entry-level 3440x1440 ultrawide that uses a VA panel that we've seen a few times before in a variety of reviews. For gamers, that's largely a good thing. This newer wave of 144Hz models offers a tangible performance improvement over older 100Hz displays that used to occupy this price point. Not only is the refresh rate 40% higher, but response times are also better. An average response in the 7ms range isn't going to blow you away and as expected fall short of high-end alternatives, but for less than half the price of the best IPS ultrawides I've tested, there's a good amount of bang for buck on offer here, and it's nice to see response times keep up with the 144Hz refresh. Gigabyte have managed to tune this display somewhat better than their competitors as well. Peak performance is better if you plan on gaming at a fixed 144Hz, and average performance is also slightly better. This isn't a case of a company cutting performance to hit a certain price point. Gigabyte are actually doing quite a good job here. The main downside being dark level smearing, which is an issue with basically every VA panel in this price range. Unfortunately, while response time performance is better than other displays in this class, color performance is worse. Gigabyte have paid little attention to factory calibration, so out-of-the-box results are below average. This is fixable to an extent through OSD tweaks and ICC profiles, but there is no doubting that both the Xiaomi and AOC alternatives I've tested come better configured from the factory. With that said, areas like brightness, contrast, and uniformity are all very good, so it's not an outright fail in the color department. This is one of those situations where it will depend on what you want out of a monitor as to which option is better. If your preference is response times and gaming performance, I'd choose the Gigabyte G34WQC, which at $400 is an excellent buy. That's an outstanding price point. If you prefer color performance, the Xiaomi Mi Curve 34 is a bit better in this department and only slightly worse for gaming performance, while also packing a better build quality. Pricing does vary depending on where you are, but the Mi Curved can be cheaper, although harder to find and not sold officially in many regions. What I'm most happy about is Gigabyte are really bringing it to established brands in the budget market despite being a relatively new player for monitors. Their latest few non-Aorus branded products have been really great, and I hope this trend continues because more competition is better for consumers. That's it for this review. If you want to support our monitor testing, get access to things like ICC profiles and our Discord chat if you want to ask me questions, and the best way to do that is via our Patreon or Floatplane pages. You'll find links to that in the description below. You can also subscribe to the channel for more monitor testing, and we still have a bunch of monitors to get through before the end of 2020, so stay tuned for that. That's it for this one, and I'll catch you in the next one.